All right, welcome everybody. We are going to give it a few minutes before we get started, just to allow some people to log on to our training. It is nice to see all of you. We will also be recording this session and sharing it to Facebook Live. And welcome to everybody watching us on Facebook. We're really happy to have you guys support us with this training. All right, perfect. If it's okay, we will go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody today to our COVID-19 training session. I wanted to go over a few housekeeping items as we are on a meeting-based training. You are able to mute and unmute yourself, so please be mindful in regards to that. So please mute yourself if you are not speaking. You can also use the raise your hand button on the bottom of your screen. You can find that in your participants button at the bottom and raise your hand if you have any questions, which we definitely want this to be as interactive as possible. Please ask questions. We want to answer the questions that you guys have. We will address those as well at the end of the training. Please use the chat if you would like to introduce yourself to let us know who's here. And you can also use the Q&A section to ask your questions there, and it's totally fine. And for those of you joining us on Facebook Live, please place your questions in the comments. We would love to support you as well. And so with that being said, my name is Teresa Garcia and I work for the Coalition Against Domestic Violence. We are also joined with Rachel, our Chief Programs Officer, who helped create this training for our programs. And also we have Dr. Nestor Sosa, who is the Infectious Disease Chief. And we're so excited to have this training for you guys, and let me know if I can support you in any way. And so with that being said, Dr. Sosa.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Teresa and Rachel, for inviting me here. I'm really delighted. I'm sharing my screen here. Let me just, can you all see my first slide? Okay, perfect. Yeah, so I'm Nestor Sosa. I'm the Infectious Disease Division Chief. I am an infectious disease by training. I actually have around 15 months since I moved from Panama to here, to New Mexico, and I really love it. I feel really at home in this beautiful land. I enjoy my hiking trips and everything. So for me, it's really a pleasure to share with you some of the information that we have about COVID-19 vaccines. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to review sort of do like an overview of COVID vaccines and then talk about the efficacy, how we actually evaluate how good a vaccine is, and the safety of the vaccines that we are using. And then I'm going to leave plenty of time for discussion, because I know you have many questions, and I really encourage you, as Teresa was saying, to ask as many questions that we have. All questions are really welcome. So let me advance the slides here. So yeah, so this coronavirus pandemic has really triggered really a dramatic development of vaccines. And this is the so-called coronavirus vaccine tracker from the New York Times, in which actually their journalists are actually looking all over the world to see which vaccines are being developed, at what stage of development they are. And just to give you an idea, vaccines and drugs go to several phases. You first do like animal studies, and then they go into human studies. And we usually call them phase 1, 2, and 3. So you'll see that there are like 43 in phase 1, which are usually small studies with 50, 20 people who are vaccinated, mostly to see that the vaccine is safe in a healthy population. And then you move to larger studies, studies with maybe a couple of hundred of patients. Those are the phase 2. And then you do ones with phase 3, which are studies that include thousands of patients, 30,000, 40,000. For instance, the Pfizer vaccine study for the COVID included 40,000 subjects. So a lot of people vaccinated either with the vaccine or a placebo, and then you study the results of those trials. So we have like at least 20 in phase 3. 2 that are approved, which are obviously Moderna and Pfizer, that we're going to be talking about. And there's some others that have been approved in countries like China and Russia that you probably heard on the news, but they have not really gone through the to the traditional FDA phases of study. They have been studying phase 1, 2, and jump into either the general population or some specific population in some of these countries. And I think so far there's one or maybe two vaccines that have been like discontinued because they were not good enough. They were not immunogenic. So there's plenty, and these are the names of some of the companies and in which state of research they are. So the Pfizer and Moderna obviously have completed the first phase 3 studies and are in fact available in the United States and many other countries around the world. But there's also the Russian vaccine, the so-called Sputnik, made by the Gamaleya Institute, which is being used in Latin America and obviously in Russia and many other places. And there are a whole bunch of other, probably the two next vaccine that we're going to be hearing about here in the United States are the Johnson & Johnson that are supposed to present their data to the FDA next week, as soon as next week, and also the Oxford AstraZeneca, which is a vaccine developed by the University of Oxford and the company AstraZeneca, which has already been approved in the UK and is actually being considered in Europe, but had some delays here in the United States for its approval. So we're probably going to have more information about those vaccines really shortly. So how do vaccines work? And I'm going to just take a step back and explain a little bit, what is a vaccine? We get vaccines since childhood, but we don't necessarily know how they work. So really the principle of a vaccine is to show the immune system, our defenses, our system of defenses in our body, show them either a piece of a virus or bacteria or a dead virus or bacteria, and try to teach the immune system how to fight against that bacteria without developing the disease. So it's short of having the illness, it actually teaches the immune system how to react. And what happens in reality is that we get production of antibodies and also some specialized cells that when they see again this virus or bacteria, they react very rapidly and they prevent, in most cases, they prevent the disease from occurring. So that's the basic idea. This idea is not new. It's actually in the late 1800 and 1700, they developed this idea of vaccine. And it was basically because a very clever scientist in England actually saw that people who work with cows were not becoming ill with smallpox, because cows have vaccinia, which is basically similar to smallpox, but it happened to cows, but it also protects humans from smallpox. So he concluded that maybe they were exposed to this disease in cows and prevented disease. So he decided to inject actually the material from lesions from vaccinia into humans, and in that way prevent the smallpox from developing. And then we have, since then, there are like 38 diseases that have vaccines developed and that can be used to prevent or at least ameliorate the severity of disease. Regarding COVID specifically, there are different types of vaccine. You can sort of train the immune system in different ways. You can actually use an inactivated virus. So you take a virus and you kill it with alcohol or formalin, and then you inject it into a person, and you hope for the immune system to react to that dead virus. So those will be inactivated vaccines, and there are many inactivated vaccines in the market. For COVID, there are a few that are under study. The other thing is just to use a different virus, sort of a mild or really a virus that cannot produce any disease, and then you produce this virus with the information to produce a protein that belongs to the COVID-19 virus. So you use this virus, sort of a transport media, almost like a Trojan horse, and you inject this other virus, but it has inside information and how to produce a protein. So it's very, very interesting, that model, and that's the model of the AstraZeneca and the Russian vaccine. They're using an adenovirus either from chimpanzee or a very inactivated adenovirus that actually serves as the conduit for this piece of DNA that is going to make the protein that the immune system is going to recognize. And then you can also inject the nucleic acid, so the genomic information, and that's in the form of RNA or DNA. And this is exactly what the Moderna and Pfizer vaccine they do. They give your cells, the cells in your arm, the information to produce for a few hours the spike protein, which is a key protein of the virus. And it's very clever because you don't need to kill the virus. You don't need to use another virus. You just give the messenger RNA, which is how it's called, and that messenger RNA makes protein, and then your immune system recognizes the protein and it's ready to fight against it as soon as it sees it again. I think the presentation is advancing automatically. So, and there's also just the protein itself, so you can actually just inject the protein, and there's a protein vaccine that is going to come in the market probably in the next few months from a company called Novavax. So these are all different models, but at the end, the important thing is that you're teaching your immune system how to fight the real thing, the real virus. When you are infected or you're in contact with a person, your immune system knows and recognizes this protein, the spike protein, which is actually the one on the surface of the virus, and attacks that virus immediately, because you have been trained, you have trained your immune system in how to recognize this foreign protein, this spike protein. So far, and I checked this website, which is actually counting the number of vaccine in the world, we have vaccinated 64 million people in the world. So in just a month, essentially, it's been a month since the vaccine have been available and approved by some of the regulatory organizations. The world have vaccinated 64, and you can see the numbers. Obviously, the United States 20 million, China 15 million, and so on. But if you adjust this by 100 people, so what percentage of the population? Really, Israel and United Arab Emirates have vaccinated 47 and 25% of their population. So it's amazing in such a short time that those countries have been able to vaccinate, 1/4 or almost half of their population. Obviously, the United States lags a little bit behind those countries with 6.2% of the population vaccinated, but hopefully it will go up in the next few weeks. And this is important because we have a lot of people have been vaccinated, and we now have information, much more information on the safety and efficacy of these vaccines, and we're going to have much more coming in the next few weeks. So the next question, how do we evaluate? And you probably heard on the news, the Pfizer vaccine has a 94% efficacy or 95% efficacy. There's a relatively simple way to calculate this. And this efficacy data comes from clinical studies in which you vaccinate a group of people with the vaccine, with the real vaccine, and then you give to another group just a placebo, which could be normal saline or another vaccine that is not supposed to protect you against COVID. And then you follow these people for 2 months, 3 months, and see how many of them develop COVID. So for instance, this is just an example. If we do a study, we take 100 subjects and we give them the vaccine, and another group of 100 subjects, and we give them a placebo, and then we follow them, let's say 2 months, and then during those 2 months in the vaccine group, 1 person developed COVID, and 10 person or 10 patients or people develop COVID in the placebo group. This is a 90% efficacy. So you were able to prevent 9 of 10 cases, because if this were 2 placebos, it would be 10 and 10 just by luck. It would be 10 and 10, but in reality it was 1 and 10. So you protected or you prevented 9 out of those 10 cases. So that's a 90% efficacy, and that's basically how we calculate vaccine efficacy in clinical trials. So you're going to be hearing this efficacy or efficacy term, and that's what it really means. And this table actually, and I'm just want to, I know it's a very heavy table, but you can just look at the red numbers and names. Here we have the different vaccines, Pfizer, Moderna, which are both of them use mRNA, and the AstraZeneca vaccine, these are the 3 vaccines that actually have published their data in the medical literature. So we have clear-cut information of their efficacy, and you can see the efficacy of the Pfizer 95, efficacy of the Moderna 94, and the AstraZeneca 70%. And actually, when we started developing these vaccines 9 months ago, we said that anything above 50% was going to be useful to help fight the epidemic. So these 3 vaccines, although obviously there's a numerical difference between the AstraZeneca and the Pfizer and Moderna, these 3 vaccines are well above the 50% efficacy needed to be considered useful, a vaccine useful to fight the pandemic. And another important information is that it not only prevented with this efficacy prevented COVID, it also prevented severe disease dramatically. And you can see there were 30 cases, let's say in the Moderna, in the placebo arm of Moderna, 30 cases of severe COVID and only 1 in the vaccinated patients. So there was, 30-to-1 proportion of protection. Actually, the AstraZeneca had 0 severe cases, although their efficacy was apparently less. But when you analyze just the severe case, it was basically at 100% efficacy preventing severe disease. So really, really very, very efficacious vaccines. Just to give you an idea, the flu vaccine that we take every year has in a good year, between 50 and 70% efficacy. So that's the best you get from an influenza vaccine. And these vaccines are way, especially the mRNA vaccines, are way over that number. So it's a really, really welcome news that we can achieve that type of protection by getting this vaccine. And just to give you a complete international picture, the Sputnik, the Russian vaccine, although has not been published, and that's what I said on published data. This is from press release, or if you go to the website, but you can find their efficacy around 90%. The Sinopharma, which is an inactivated, sorry that it's in Spanish, inactivated, 79 to 86, and Sinovac, also another inactivated vaccine, 50%. So even these vaccines used in other countries or recommended in other countries have achieved a pretty decent efficacy in their studies. And let me just give you a little bit more information on the 2 most common vaccines that you're probably gonna be presented in the next few weeks here in the United States. First is the Pfizer, and this graph is very interesting. This is what we call the cumulative cases of COVID graph, and you can see in red those who received the vaccine. This is the scientific name of the Pfizer vaccine. And the blue are the placebo, and you can clearly see how the number of cases go up in the placebo as soon as almost 14 days. And this is sort of an enhancement of that area. So around 12 days after vaccination, you can see how the placebo and the vaccinees diverge. They separate, and people with the placebo keep getting COVID, as opposed to those on the vaccine. There are very few cases throughout the follow-up, which lasted for this specific trial 2 months after the second dose. So very, very striking difference between those who received the vaccine and those who received the placebo in the studies. And the other important information is the safety. And really, it's very important to understand that with any vaccine, you're going to have some type of reaction to the vaccine. And that's good, because that means that your immune system is actually recognizing the protein and is reacting to it. And we actually call it reactogenic effects of a vaccine. And yet they're very common with these vaccines. Like, people have pain in the site of injection, 84% with the Pfizer, maybe a little bit of fatigue for 24 hours, headache, maybe muscle pain, in some percentage, usually worse after the second dose. But these are really common adverse reactions which are related to the reactogenicity of the vaccine. And it's something that we have seen with other vaccines. The serious adverse reactions were very, very rare. Only when they were used in a lot of people, we have seen more allergic reaction. I'm going to mention something about the allergic reaction, but really a relatively safe vaccine. And now have been studied in, as I said, 40,000 patients in this study, more than 40, and many more have been vaccinated already in the United States. So we have a very robust group of people that have been vaccinated, and we know a lot about the side effects of this vaccine, which, as I said, aside from the local reactions and maybe the mild fatigue or headache, the day following the vaccination, it's relatively safe. And in fact, the only thing that it's worth mentioning has been the allergic reaction, and this is actually a publication from the morbidity and mortality report from the CDC, and they actually analyzed the first almost 2 million doses of Pfizer vaccine. They analyzed 1,893 vaccinees, and they found only 21 cases of severe allergic reaction. So 21 out of almost 2 million gives you a ratio of 11 per million of this severe allergic reaction, which is really infrequent. It's a rare event, but nevertheless, we are telling people when they get their vaccine to stay around the vaccination area for at least 15 minutes. If you have history of allergy, to stay there for 30 minutes, just in case you're one of these unlucky subjects that are going to have, itching or rash, or maybe a more severe reaction after the vaccine. But it's really, really rare. The Moderna vaccine is a very similar efficacy. As I said, 94%, and this is the graph. You can see the same phenomenon. Those who receive the vaccine, those who receive the placebo, and the number of cases just keep going up in those in placebo and remains relatively flat in those who receive the vaccine. So very efficacious in preventing COVID-19 and also preventing severe disease, which is what we really want to prevent, people, being sicker, going to the hospital, or dying. And if you look at the reaction, these are the local reactions on top, and the systemic reaction, or things like fever, fatigue, myalgias. And you can see, that there's a significant proportion of subjects, around 70 to 80%, who are going to have either pain or something else, especially 1 day, 1.5 days after the vaccine. And then those symptoms usually disappear. And most of the symptoms are grade 1, meaning very mild, maybe moderate in some cases, but very few severe pain or severe fever or severe fatigue. So relatively similar to other vaccines like the shingles vaccine, which is also very reactogenic. So nothing really extraordinary in this. And there's also the allergic reaction with the Moderna, maybe slightly less than the Pfizer vaccine. A few patients have lymphadenopathy, which is like swollen lymph nodes, 1.14% in the vaccine arm, 0.6 in the placebo. So even placebo induced some enlarged lymph nodes. Hypersensitivity reaction, 1.5% versus 1.1 in placebo. There were 3 Bell's palsy, which is like facial paralysis, only 3 cases out of 30,000 people in the vaccine, 1 case in the placebo group. And this is within the expected frequency for this disease. Really no imbalance in the serious adverse event, no imbalance in the death between the placebo and the active group. So a really very safe vaccine. So conclusions, and I'll go into discussion now. First of all, we have, now at least 2, hopefully soon we'll have 3 or 4 vaccines that are really efficacious and really safe to prevent COVID-19, a disease that has already been associated with millions of deaths around the world, over 400,000 here in the United States. The most frequent side effects or reactogenicity are pain in the injection site, maybe mild to moderate fatigue, headache, low-grade fever, 24 to 36 hours, but it's usually a temporary thing. And it's a good thing because it means that your immune system is recognizing the spike protein and actually building an immune reaction to be ready when the real, as I said, the real virus come or you're exposed to it in the future, your immune system will react to it. And the only sort of small red flag is the allergic reaction. 11 cases per million vaccine doses for Pfizer, 2.5 per million vaccine doses by Moderna. So really, it's really infrequent, and it's manageable. I mean, most of the patients that have had the allergic reaction respond to the treatment that we use for allergic reaction, something like the EpiPen or maybe Benadryl or some other medication. So it's a reversible but important allergic reaction. So I'm going to stop sharing. I think that was my last, and I can answer all the questions that you like. Thank you very much.
Perfect. We do have one in our chat by one of our programs, Melinda Williams. Speaking about the, facial paralysis, does that facial paralysis go away?
Yeah, in this patient, it was reversible. And interestingly enough, facial paralysis is something that happens all the time. I mean, not necessarily associated with the vaccine, but it was probably the only thing that we saw a slight, more cases, 3 versus 1 in the placebo. So that was sort of concern, but it's also rare. And so far we haven't seen that many cases with the real vaccination, not in the study, but actually with the rollout of the vaccine. The CDC is actually they have an automated vaccine adverse event a system in which if you're a physician or a provider, you can actually notify them of any reaction. So we're going to have much more information now that we have 20 million people vaccinated. We are going to have in the next few weeks much more information on other really rare reactions. And it's important. I mean, some of these reactions will occur by chance. They may not necessarily be associated with the vaccine. They just happen. If you're, I usually use this example. If you're, 85 and you have a bad heart, you can get a vaccine and have a heart attack 3 days after the vaccine. That doesn't necessarily prove that the vaccine is the cause. Maybe you were going to have it no matter what. It's sort of, fact of life. And it's important to distinguish what's really a reaction and what's something that occurs because of your underlying condition or your age. Sometimes, especially the media tend to maximize, oh, somebody got the vaccine and died 3 days later. You have to really dwell, see what happened, what type of underlying conditions to really associate the vaccine with what happened afterwards.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We did have an earlier question from our executive director, Pam Wiseman. What is expected Johnson & Johnson? Pam, if you would like to unmute yourself and maybe clarify, and then we have.
Yeah, I meant to say, what is the expected efficacy of Johnson & Johnson, if we know that yet?
Right. No, I don't think we know. I have been listening carefully to all of the press releases and comments by Dr. Fauci. Yeah. But they haven't really revealed the efficacy. I hope it's better than, it's a similar to the Sputnik and similar to the AstraZeneca. So if you point a gun to my head, I'm going to say it's going to be between 70 and 90, but we don't know. We'll know next week. I think for sure we'll know next week, but the AstraZeneca was 70% overall. The Sputnik, which is very similar, uses an adenovirus vector. It's 90 according to the Russian Institute. So it should be around that, 80, 84, but I haven't really heard anything official so far.
May I ask one more question quickly? What if a person is pregnant and gives birth to a baby, let's say a couple of weeks after a COVID infection, is that baby going to have protective antibodies?
Yeah, that's a great question. First of all, pregnancy increases the risk of complications with COVID, especially if you are close to term. You can imagine the big belly compressing the lungs. So if you get a lung infection, it's going to be harder to breathe. And we have seen that a slightly larger percentage of pregnant females who get COVID are hospitalized. So that's one thing. So COVID is not a very good thing to have when you're pregnant, definitely. And there have been association with like premature birth. So the fever and the cough and thing tend to trigger the delivery sooner than what is normally expected. So that's important. In theory, yeah, if the mother have COVID, there are some antibodies that will cross the placenta and give some temporary protection to the baby. And you can also, this has not been studied formally, but I can tell you because with most diseases that happens. And also the vaccination. If you're vaccinated and you're pregnant, you are going to give the benefit of those antibodies that cross the placenta to the baby. So your baby may be protected for a few weeks. Those antibodies usually do not last forever. They last for a few weeks or maybe up to 6 months. And then they basically go away. But there is even that benefit that if you vaccinate somebody who's pregnant, either on purpose or inadvertently, the baby may be born with some protective immunity, at least temporarily. So it's really a good question and very interesting.
Thank you so much. I also wanted to, it looks like Rachel had raised her hand earlier, and it looks like some people as well have followed you on those echo calls, and just thank you for that. Rachel.
Thanks. Thank you, Dr. Sosa, for helping this be so available and accessible, for all of us who are just trying to take information and make decisions about our health and those kinds of things. So thank you. I'm wondering, the graph that you showed earlier about the sort of efficacy of the placebo and then the two vaccines, because there's information coming out about being able to extend the time between the two shots, was that graph about the first vaccine shot or after the second vaccine? I'm just wondering, so like in these periods of time that might be extended for people, right, how protected will they be before their second shot?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Yeah, both graphs, they actually started counting cases from the first dose, especially to illustrate how the curve separates after the first dose. So yeah, so there are a couple of things. First of all, one dose give you some protection, so it's not negligible. And in fact, if you look at the Moderna and Pfizer, it ranges between 50 and 80%. The problem is that most of the patients received 2 doses. So this study was not designed to evaluate the efficacy of 1 dose, but actually 2. So the period between the first and the second dose was 3 weeks for Pfizer, 4 weeks. So it was a very, very short time that they actually evaluated the protection of 1 dose. So it's very difficult to reach very robust conclusions from those studies because they were designed to be 2-dose study. But that said, we know that the one dose confers some degree of protection because already after the first dose, especially like 7 days after the first dose, you start seeing the 2 graphs separated. So people who got the first dose of the vaccine were less likely to get COVID while they were waiting for the second dose than those who got the placebo. So yes, there is some protection. And in fact, this is something that we have discussed in many forums. The 3 weeks and the 4 weeks that were established for those vaccines, the main idea was to get the study finished rapidly. You don't want to, do a study and say, okay, we're going to give the first dose now and the next one on 3 months, because then the study was going to take 4 months, and the epidemic was, raging through the population. So it was actually sort of a very capricious or random number. They said, okay, Pfizer is going to do 3 weeks and Moderna 4 weeks, but those numbers are not written in stone. Based on that reality and the fact that we know that other vaccines, you can space them, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. If you look at the child vaccination, there are vaccines like tetanus we get every 5 years. So there's really nothing very solid regarding immunology that you have to give it in 21 days or it doesn't work. You can actually wait a little bit longer. Based on that, actually WHO and CDC are allowing a window up to 42 days, which is what some of these patients actually waited during the study. So it is probably, the same efficacy or very close to the same efficacy if you get a 21 or 26 days or maybe up to 42 days. Is probably the same. The immune system remembers those antigens, those spike protein, longer than 3 weeks. You can be sure of that. It's just that the way the studies were designed, we're trying to follow them to the letter, to be faithful to the evidence, which is good. But probably, in the case of a pandemic, when we have to vaccinate more people, and 1 dose will probably give them some protection, it's probably better to do that than to just force everybody to get it in 21 days. So that's a long answer to the question, but that's what we analyze and think about when we discuss this interval between vaccines.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that question, Rachel. The next one that we have is going to be from Brandy. How was this vaccine developed and released so fast when it typically takes 2 to 5 years for a new vaccine to pass all R&D and human trials? Because what worries me the most is that these vaccines were released too fast. And, I did have that worry as well at the beginning, because working in the pharmaceutical industry, it takes about 10 years, right, to get the FDA to approve things. And so those are, that's a very, very valid question.
Right. Absolutely. Even when I started, reading that they were going to develop vaccines, I said, well, we're going to have them, probably in 2-3 years, maybe 4 at the most. I'll be honest, that was my belief, because I have worked in vaccine development and in clinical study for many years, and that was the usual time, sometimes even longer, as you mentioned. So yeah, so the what happened this time was really revolutionary. First of all, they didn't skip any steps. I mean, all of these vaccines went through animal studies. I have reviewed the papers on macaques and other animals that were vaccinated. So they tested in animals. And what they did, they actually compressed the times of the phases. The normal process, you do an animal study, let's say in 1 year, and you wait and you publish your results, and then then you get money to do the phase 1, and then you do the phase 1, may take you 6 months to a year, then you wait to the end, you publish those results, and that's what builds up the time. And also the regulatory process, you when you send a study to the FDA, they can take 6 months to respond to you in the normal time. All of those times were compressed into hours and days. I mean, now the FDA is waiting for the Johnson & Johnson material. I think they're at the door waiting for the Johnson & Johnson results to come in, and they're going to sit down and discuss it probably the following day, or maybe the same day that they get the information. They're going to sit down with the expert. So they have followed all of the steps. It's just that they eliminated all of the waste of time, all of the bureaucratic processes. They have shortened it dramatically. But they did the phase 1, they did the phase 2, because I saw the publications. They did the phase 3. They presented the phase 3 to the FDA. They also presented to the ACIP, which is the CDC group of experts. And they both gave the approval after reviewing all of this information, both the basic science, the animal study, the phase 1, the phase 2, and the phase 3. So what they did is they eliminated all the time that they normally waste waiting for money, waiting for approvals, waiting for the FDA to answer. All of those things were eliminated, and everybody worked feverishly to get those results. So, and they went through the whole thing. And in fact, this study continue. Most of these studies are going to gather more data. There's more information to come. There are a few questions that had not been completely answered, but they have enough information to make the decision of giving an emergency authorization to try to fight the pandemic. That's the reality. But they went through the whole thing, and in fact, some of these studies have many more subjects than we normally enroll. I've done influenza studies and meningitis studies, and we get up to 10,000 subjects, 5,000 subjects. They enroll between Moderna and Pfizer 70,000 subjects in these studies in many countries, really, in a record time, and they follow them for then 2 months after the second dose to make sure that the vaccine was protective, and they're still following them.
Absolutely. Thank you for answering that question. I know that that's lingering for so many people. How was it done so fast? So the next one that we have will be from David River. Do we know yet how immunity from having recovered from COVID compares to immunity from the vaccination?
Yeah, those are great questions. I mean, you're answering all the questions that are like in discussion in the scientific forum. Yeah, so we know a little bit more about disease, about the natural immunity from infection, because we've been dealing with COVID for almost a year now, as opposed to the vaccine, which is really more like around 6 months. So we know that probably between 80 and 90% of people who get COVID develop a very robust immune reaction, and they are protected. We believe that they are protected from reinfection at least for 5 months. There's actually a study in the UK in which they follow healthcare workers which were positive and negative, and they noticed that there was over 80% protection at least for 5 months from reinfection. We suspect the protection is going to last a little bit longer, but that's as much data as we have been able to analyze so far in people who have had the disease. With the vaccines, we do not know how long the protection is going to be. The longest the longest follow-up that we have is around 4 months with the Moderna. There's a study in which they actually took one of the first few patients that were vaccinated with Moderna, and they have followed them, and they have measured the antibodies, and the antibodies are hanging in there very high 4 months later. So at least 4 months. Obviously, those antibodies are not gonna go like this. They're not gonna disappear. So we're probably gonna have like a very slow decay. Maybe it will last a year, maybe 15 months. The protection, we really don't know, but we can, based on the inclination of the antibody, the protection is probably gonna last at least a year, which is what we need to be able to crush the epidemic, to have like the so-called herd immunity. And actually, if we need like a booster in a year or a year and a half, so be it. We just want to get back to normal and get this pandemic at least under some degree of control. So that's what we know. And just one more thing. And many scientists believe that the immunity produced by the vaccine is better than with the infection, which is really, it's something that you would say, yeah, let me see if I heard this correctly from Dr. Sosa. The vaccine seems to induce a stronger, better immune protection than natural infection. And the reason is because when you are infected with the virus not only, stimulates your immune system, but also tries to confuse your immune system, trying to defeat your immune system. So not all the time you're able to produce a very robust immune reaction. Like for instance, if you had a very mild disease, we know that a mild disease do not give you very strong protection. A vaccine, it's, no matter what you do, it's going to give you that 95, 94% protection, which is very, very high. It's even higher than the 80 something that the disease gives you. So vaccine is even better than disease. And that's why we are recommending people who already have COVID to be vaccinated nevertheless, to go ahead and get the vaccine, probably wait 3 months to make sure that you clear the infection and you're ready to sort of learn how to fight the spike protein again. But definitely you have to be vaccinated to get that strong and pure immune reaction that the vaccine, or immune protection that the vaccine actually gives you, that the virus do not or does not.
You have another question that's in the chat, but just to follow up to, what you stated earlier, you said that the antibodies, will continue to, I guess, plateau or decrease a little bit. Do you foresee this maybe, for example, the flu shot, they recommend that you get it every year. You said it lasts about maybe 15 months at the most. Right. Do you maybe think that this might be just like the flu shot where you would get, your shot every year just for that extra protection, especially, with the follow-up question as well after that is, how likely is that antibodies from having COVID will be protected against a new variant?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the first question first. I mean, I don't know. The short answer is I don't know. We don't really, nobody knows. Not even the immunologists know what's going to happen, if we're going to need a booster, if we're not going to need a booster. It's possible. I mean, if you look at the how long the antibodies last, we may need a protection. But there's another thing which is a little bit more technical, but it's also important. We have in our body something called memory cells, and they're called memory cells because they remember for years and years the infection that we have had. If you had chickenpox when you were a kid, you have B cells, memory B cells in your bone marrow, in your spleen, that remember that disease. You may have forgotten. Maybe your mother remembers, you don't, but your B cells remember the chickenpox virus that you had, and they give you protection for many years. The same with measles and many other diseases, they do remember. So it's possible that even if the antibodies go down, as I said, very slowly, but go down, maybe that immune cells will remember forever or for many years the coronavirus. We just don't know. We haven't had time to study that because we've only been fighting with the virus for 1 year. So there's hope that it may be even longer protection. So we don't know. I mean, it's possible that we need a repeat. The second part of the question is a little bit more complicated. As any virus, this coronavirus is changing. The more it gets into people, the more it have to survive within your body. It develops some mutation to try to escape your immune system. And in some areas where there have been many cases, like the UK, Brazil, South Africa, there are these new variants, which are basically mutations of the virus that they occur at random, but some of these random mutations benefit the virus, and they are able to escape their immune system. So they fool the immune system because they change their surface protein, and then the immune system doesn't recognize the virus completely. So that's also a possibility that maybe 2 years down the road, the virus will have changed so much that the vaccines that we have right now are not effective, and these manufacturer, Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson will have to modify the vaccine a little bit. And that's what occurs with influenza. Influenza every year changes a little bit. We call it antigenic drift. It's like, it's not the same virus that circulates this year. It's slightly different to the one next year. It's slightly different to the one the following year. And that's what the experts have to change the vaccine composition a little bit to give you that extra protection every year to the new variant. So this may also occur. And in fact, I heard yesterday in the news that Moderna is already working on a vaccine that incorporates these variants, especially the South African and Brazilian, that seem to be less susceptible to the immune control by the people who have been vaccinated. So I think it's going to happen. Probably we don't know how fast or slow that's going to happen, but it's really a possibility that we're going to have to modify the vaccine and maybe get another shot in a couple of years or a year. We don't know.
Thank you. And I know you touched base a little bit on that, but we do have a couple of questions that maybe you can answer together. What can you tell us about the variants, and will the vaccine work against the variants?
Right, exactly. So first of all, the variants are like a natural occurring process. RNA viruses are, when they reproduce, when they replicate and replicate, they don't do it perfectly. They make mistakes, and there are a few changes in their composition. Most of these changes are really meaningless. They don't do anything for or against the virus, but there are few mutations that change their envelope or change their capacity to produce disease. And then when that occurs, the variants become more common. If you have a virus that is more easily transmitted, that's what's going to happen. It's going to outcompete all of the other viruses, and it's going to become the dominant variant. That's exactly what happened in the UK. The UK in September discovered this virus with a few mutations from the one that was circulating, and over the next 3 months, from September to December, it became the dominant variant in London and many areas in the UK because it was more readily transmitted. So it was easier to go from one person to the other. So as many more people became, in contact with each other, they got the new variant, and it became simply more common. So that's what basically the variants are. Some of these variants, the changes are so small that they do not affect the vaccine, because the vaccine usually induces antibody to the whole protein. So if you have a little change in a corner of the protein, the vaccine is not going to be affected. Your immune system is still going to say, this is a spike protein, I have to attack it. This is a spike protein, I want to destroy it. I don't care. But when the changes are many, your immune system goes like, okay, is this a spike protein? Have I seen it before? And that's when the virus starts multiplying inside your body, because they have changed a lot. So like the UK variant doesn't seem to affect vaccines at all. That's what we think with the experiment that have been done with using the blood from people who have been vaccinated. But the South African and the Brazilian have many more mutations, and some of those mutations seem to decrease the protection that the vaccine confers. This is something very preliminary. I mean, we discovered the variants just a few weeks ago, and there's not enough time to reach a conclusion. But there seems to be some evidence that, in fact, that 95% protection may be slightly lower, maybe 90, maybe 89% protection, because there are some changes in the protein that may be fooling the immune system. So that's what we know right now. In any case, what we need to do is continue with the vaccination, try to protect as many people, prevent the variant from entering the country if possible, and finally flatten the curve in a permanent way. And conquer the epidemic once and for all. But the variants are definitely a concern, because they may affect the efficacy of the vaccine to some degree.
Thank you. If you guys have any more questions, please place it in the chat, or for those of us joining on Facebook. I do have one question that I've seen here and there. If you get the vaccine, does that mean that you do not have to wear your mask and follow the 6 feet, right, taking all your precautions, things like that?
Washing your hands and everything. Yeah. First of all, that's a very good question. I think at the beginning, I mean, right now we cannot remove the mask and stop the social distancing, and there are several reasons. Number one is that the protection is not 100%. It's 90, 94, 95, depending on which, 70% if you get the AstraZeneca vaccine. So it's definitely not 100%. So you can still get the disease. The other thing that we haven't really mentioned, and I haven't really mentioned this, is that we do not know if the vaccine prevents asymptomatic infection. As I said, prevents COVID, symptomatic COVID, and severe COVID. That's no doubt. But we don't really, and this has not been published yet. The Pfizer and Moderna are looking into this data, but they haven't really published those results, because they wanted to demonstrate that the vaccine protected against death, against hospitalization, against severe disease. They didn't care too much about asymptomatic disease, but we're going to see that data. So it is possible that you, despite being vaccinated, you may get the infection, be asymptomatic, and transmit it to a coworker or a friend or a patient, like in my case, that I see immunocompromised patient, and actually make them sick, and they can even die from the disease that I transmit to them without knowing. being asymptomatic. So there's definitely not 100% protection for disease. There's not 100% protection from infection. So we need to do it. We need to continue. Maybe in the future, when the number of cases is really very low, when there's no circulation in the community, when everybody or 80% or 85% of the population is vaccinated, we can then remove our mask and go back to a more normal, living, knowing that we are protected by the vaccine and by the fact that there's no virus circulation. So you're not going to get an asymptomatic infection. But for now, while we wait for everybody to be vaccinated, even if you're vaccinated, you need to continue with the measures, not only to protect yourself, because it's not 100%, but more importantly, to protect others around you that are not vaccinated and that may, or people who basically, there are going to be patients that are not going to be able to develop antibodies. Let's say a patient who's receiving chemotherapy for cancer, something simple to understand. They may be too weak to produce antibodies, and even if they are vaccinated, they may not have a robust immune reaction. So if you don't protect and you transmit the disease to them, they may even die of COVID, despite being vaccinated, both you and the patient. So that's another reason why we need to keep the measures until we have certainty that there are very few cases, a few weeks without any cases in New Mexico. And then, the governor or the authorities, whoever, will say, okay, we are no longer having COVID. We're authorized to, go back to normal. Masks are not necessary, etc. At that point, you can remove your mask. But in the meantime, it's probably better to stay safe, even if you're vaccinated.
Perfect. Thank you. Oh, Rachel, go ahead.
Dr. Sosa, I know that Terry might be wrapping us up here. If anyone has any last minute questions, thank you, Terry, for helping facilitate and for all the information, Dr. Sosa. While we were getting ready to log on today, I picked your brain a little bit as someone who has been through multiple epidemics and, just has to be neck deep in all of this information all the time, much of which is not always good news. And I'm wondering if you could share some of just a quick tip that you were talking about before we got on around how you really navigate this as the goalposts kind of keep moving, that we, our hopes get up about something and then we get new words like variants and that becomes overwhelming. And I'm just wondering if we could rely on some of your wisdom, as this is your bread and butter, that you've been working with for so long and it's new to the rest of the general public. So
sure. But definitely the worst. I mean, in fact, I have, in my previous job, I was in Panama. So we went through the chikungunya epidemic, Zika, dengue, H1N1, and I was sort of in a leadership position. So a lot of the responsibility fell on my shoulders. But this has really been the most difficult. And I think the lesson, the main lesson that I have learned in this crisis and during the pandemics or epidemics that I have lived before is to try to make yourself useful to other people in any way you can. In my case, because I'm an infectious disease, it's trying to understand the disease, try to educate others how to protect themselves, how to access the best treatment based on the best evidence. That's been my job. But if your job is as a volunteer, to volunteer and work, doing anything you can, but not being the victim of paralysis because of fear, hiding in your home or not doing anything. If you can work from your computer, if you can do something, but that's the best, I think, advice, to try to make yourself useful to others, and that help conquer the fear, keeps you busy, keep your mind busy, and at the same time you're doing good. You're helping your fellow human beings navigate their way out of this pandemic. In my case, it's been reading hundreds of articles and trying to share the knowledge and guide and learn from the scientists how to better fight this pandemic, and that's been always useful to me.
Thank you. I do have a question, which now that you reminded me, Rachel, as we were speaking before we actually opened the training up, is my mother and my father both got the vaccine and they're located in El Paso. And Rachel brought up a good point in regards to addressing the ibuprofen, to not take ibuprofen afterwards, or what are your recommendations? Why do they do that? Or even taking antihistamines before, or allergy medications?
Yeah, that's a great question. And fortunately, the FDA has actually issue an opinion on those type of situations. So the ideal thing is not to take anything before the vaccine, and the reason is very simple. I mean, you want your body to react to the protein, or to get immunized, to actually develop the protection that you need. And there's some some scientific data that if you pre-medicate yourself with ibuprofen or even prednisone or something stronger than that, you're going to blunt your immune reaction. You're going to sort of defeat the purpose of the vaccine, which is actually to teach your immune system that this protein is a foreign protein that needs to be fought. So and really, if you think about it, most of the malaise and the fatigue occurs usually 24 hours. So it's the following day. If you get the vaccine in the afternoon, you wake up the following day like not feeling 100%. So it doesn't make sense to take an ibuprofen right before you get the vaccine. It's probably better to wait. If you have pain, if you have fever, then you can take and actually Tylenol is less intrusive in the immune system than ibuprofen. So acetaminophen instead of ibuprofen, it's even better. And the same thing goes with the allergic reaction. People are very concerned. Oh, I'm allergic to penicillin and shellfish, just to give you an example. And then they start taking like Benadryl before they go into the vaccine. That is not recommended because you're actually masking a reaction. If you have if you're one of the few, the 2.5 per million person that are going to get the lottery of a severe reaction, it's not good to mask the reaction by taking one Benadryl or two Benadryl. It's better for it to be treated the right way. Otherwise, you can have a delay reaction that could be worse. So in general, we do not recommend pre-medication unless your physician tells you need to do it for this or that reason. But in general, we recommend against pre-medication, and actually, if you have symptoms, to treat the symptoms, but not before that.
Thank you. We do have another question from Kay. What do you think the COVID world will be like in, say, 2 years from now?
Oh my God. It's so hard to predict the future. Well, I think I don't think we're going to be completely successful eradicating the disease. There's only one disease that we haven't been able to eradicate, and that's smallpox. And the vaccine was developed in 1796, so a long time ago by Dr. Jenner, as I mentioned in my talk. And it took us many years. So probably most of the industrialized world will have a vaccine. We'll have maybe more than one vaccine, and we are going to be vaccinated. At some point, we're going to start vaccinating kids also to prevent disease, even mild disease in children. So I think we're going to probably go to a very significant control of the infection. We may get sporadic outbreaks in like poor countries that did not implement vaccination, maybe in children that get the disease as a childhood disease if they are not vaccinated when they're young. So I think that's going to be the most likely scenario. I don't want to be like a negative figure, but probably we're going to see another pandemic in the future. So we have to be better prepared. Hopefully our decision-making politicians are going to be better prepared to this time around with the next pandemic. But yeah, I think we're going to control the disease, probably not eradicate it. Maybe, as I said, we'll have to get a vaccine every few years to make sure that the disease doesn't flare up in our countries, or maybe a modified vaccine if the virus continues to evolve. But I'm more concerned about another pandemic. I mean, having another coronavirus or maybe another flu epidemic in 5, 3, 10, 20 years down the road. And hopefully we'll react better to it. We'll be more cohesive and more coherent reacting to that new pandemic.
Thank you so much. We do have a couple of minutes left. If anybody has any lingering questions that you want to ask, please don't be afraid. This is a training that we opened up for everybody to ask those questions. I know that there's a lot of things going around that make you kind of wonder. So please take advantage of this time, as well as those joining us on Facebook.
I can say a few things before people have questions. Like pregnant females, the vaccine has not been studied in pregnant females, but if the person is works in a intensive care unit, is an intensive care unit nurse, probably the risk of COVID is much greater than the theoretical risk of the vaccine. So it's in pregnant and lactating females, it's a risk-benefit decision that has to be exercised by your physician, by the obstetrician, and we have had nurses that have received the vaccine because the risk is too high, and they decide to just go ahead and have it. Immunosuppressed patients should receive the vaccine. They may not benefit from it, especially the mRNA, but because this is not a live virus, it's just a piece of RNA that helps the cell produce protein. It's not going to harm them. Worst case scenario, they may not mount a strong reaction because they're immunosuppressed, but it's better to have a small protection than no protection at all. So that's a pretty common question. So I do recommend everybody who should not receive the vaccine. Well, if you had an anaphylactic reaction, which is a very severe allergic reaction with the first dose, you probably should not get the second dose. Or if you had an immediate severe reaction, you have to talk to your primary care before getting the second dose, which is something that happened. Everybody else, even if you're allergic to penicillin, allergic to sulfa, allergic to fish, any of the common allergies do not contraindicate the vaccination. So you can be vaccinated. Just be more careful, maybe stay around 30 minutes after the vaccine, just in case you start itching or something. They can give you a Benadryl or give you epinephrine or whatever is needed. But definitely it's not a contraindication unless you know you are allergic to the components of the vaccine. If you know the components and you know you're allergic to the polyethylene glycol, which is one of the things that the vaccine has, and you know you're allergic throughout your life, then you probably should not get the vaccine, or at least ask an expert, an immunologist or an allergist if you are able to receive the vaccine. But everybody else should get the vaccine. There's really no contraindication. And the Pfizer is approved from 16 years up, and the Moderna 18 year up, and soon we'll have some data on kids. So kids will be vaccinated probably by the summer or maybe fall when we have the data on them.
Dr. Sosa, what are the known risks in lactating females of getting the vaccine?
Yeah, very little. I mean, we haven't really studied the Pfizer and Moderna excluded patients who were pregnant and obviously did not on purpose study lactating females. So we don't have any experience. I can tell you that there were some patients that became pregnant during the studies, and we are sort of gathering that information. I think there's not a big issue with the mRNA vaccines. I'll probably be reluctant if you use like a attenuated live virus that can give you a disease, but mRNA, it's basically digested within the cells in probably hours to a few days, and the protein goes away also in a few days. So it's very unlikely that it's going to affect either the baby or the mother. But again, because we don't have information, the official recommendation is to do a risk-benefit analysis. If you are a physician or a nurse and you work with COVID patients, I would definitely say, you better vaccinate and protect yourself and your baby from COVID. If on the other hand, your work, it's from a computer, you work at home, you're able to social distance, then you can wait. You can wait for the, when you're not lactating to get the vaccination.
And the attenuated live virus is the AstraZeneca?
Right. Those are non-replicative virus. So they are even, they are less troublesome than attenuated virus, but I would be a little bit more reluctant to recommend those in a pregnant or lactating female, because after all, it's a virus. It's not just mRNA, it's a virus that enters the cell, although they have made these adenoviruses non-replicative. They have eliminated their ability to replicate within the cells. I would be a little bit more reluctant to recommend it in a pregnant than an mRNA. But again, it's a benefit analysis. Again, it's something that should be considered. If the risk of COVID is very, very high, then you probably should go ahead and vaccinate either the pregnant or lactating woman. But it's really, and that's what the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology and the CDC actually endorse: a risk-benefit analysis, individualized risk-benefit analysis in those situations.
Thank you very much.
All right, it looks like this was an amazing discussion. Thank you all for joining us today. I did want to let you know that this session is recorded. We have also shared it on Facebook, and so you can catch it there as well. We will upload it to our YouTube channel, so you are more than welcome to also follow us there. We have all of our prior trainings there. If there are not any more questions, I just want to say thank you, Dr. Sosa, for coming on and having this training and working with Rachel and creating this for our programs and those within our community to answer these questions that we've had, or maybe lingering with, the COVID vaccine coming on. So just wanted to say thank you. And Rachel, if you had any comments.
Thank you, everybody. I got kicked off there for a second, so I'm glad to make it back just to be able to say goodbye. I think we're going to try to continue as things evolve to make sure that we're able to provide whatever information for our agencies that we can. We want people to feel confident in their approaches to things. And so as those goalposts keep moving, we'll try to find experts or pick this expert's brain again if he'll let us, as we need to be able to get information for you all. So keep in touch with Terry or me, Pam, anyone at the coalition. If there are things coming up that you're wanting more information about, that we really want to be able to provide these kinds of sessions so that people have the best information out there, because there's a whole lot of information out there, but we want you to have the right stuff. So thank you for everyone who's attended, and thank you, Dr. Sosa. This is really, really helpful. So
thank you, and thank you for all the work that you guys do. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you very much, and it's been a pleasure. I really enjoy it. And be safe, stay safe. Perfect.
All right, everybody, have a fantastic day. Thank you so much for being here. I'll be sending you the recording and the link for a survey as well, as usual. So you guys have that in your records. Have a great day. Thank you, Dr. Sosa.